All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Abby Mintz. I am a public health and pharmacy dual degree student here at Campbell, and I am working with Steph Olson on HPREP mentor and advisee training this semester as part of my practicum. So we're going to get started with just some tips and tricks with HPREP advising. So today we're just going to do a quick overview about what HPREP is going to look like, especially now with the virtual platform. We're going to go over an iceberg analogy, thinking about the truth about your mentees and your advisors or advisees that you are going to be working with. And then finally closing with looking at the social determinants as it relates to the participants you will be interacting with through HPREP. So just a little bit of background information about the participants that you will be interacting with and that you'll be advising. HPREP is a week-long virtual event this year. It's got events such as mock interviews, obviously advising, and meetings with our own student mentors. The idea behind this program is to help to make participants more competitive applicants, give them the desire to learn a variety of health profession options, and to have an interest in service leadership. So preference for admission to this program is for underrepresented minorities, first-generation college students, and financially disadvantaged students. And finally, there are rising sophomores, juniors, and seniors that will be accepted into this program across all of the health sciences. So just think about that as you're thinking through advising and what that looks like for your participants, knowing that there are some special situations with them being, an underrepresented minority, a first-generation college student, being financially disadvantaged, and just what that will look like as you go through advising. So the first thing we wanted to bring your attention to is this idea of the iceberg analogy, and so how culture has been aptly compared to an iceberg, and there are two parts of the iceberg as you can see in this picture. The first part is the visible section above the iceberg that everyone can see, and then there's this invisible section below the water that can be suspected, imagined, or perceived. And so the participants within HPREP and all of us, we kind of have two sections that we have within our lives. Let's say we have this visible section that everyone can see, and then this more invisible section that we can kind of hold to ourselves. And so the visible section of the iceberg is only part of the bigger whole. So there's a lot more underneath that we can't see, that we don't always recognize when it comes to just a person. And so what are some things that are above and below the surface? We've got things above the surface that we can see, such as facial expressions, degree of eye contact, gestures, technology ability, personal distance, and styles of dress. These are all things that you may or may not notice, especially virtually with the people that you will be advising over the course of HPREP. And then some things below the surface that we thought of were concepts of leadership, values, work ethic, and rules about social etiquette. So again, those bottom ones are kind of more where we want to focus this training today. It's kind of the things that maybe as advisors you won't always see right off the bat, but are just as important when thinking of the person as a whole and advising them about what next steps they need to take to be successful throughout the rest of their time in undergrad or preparing to enter into professional school. So as just kind of a reflection question and something to think on your own, what are some examples that you can think of with HPREP participants that are above and below the waterline in this iceberg analogy? I would encourage you maybe to pause, think about that, and just keep this in the back of your mind as you prepare to advise HPREP participants over the course of the HPREP week. And so with this idea of what is below the waterline of the iceberg that is a person, we want to dive into the idea of the social determinants of health. This is a big public health concept, and we are public health people, and so we love this concept, but we do think that it can apply to your advisees and the people that you'll be working with throughout HPREP. So there's 5 different social determinants of health that kind of determine a person's health, well-being, livelihood, however you want to spin that. So there's educational attainment, there is social environment, there is health and health care, there's socioeconomic status, and then there's the neighborhood and built environment.
Hello everyone, my name is Caitlin. I am the other practicum student working with Abby and Steph on HPREP and training HPREP mentors. So the first social determinant of health that we're going to talk about is the neighborhood and built environment. This includes things like access to food, transportation, and quality of housing, all of which affect your students' ability to be well-rounded and successful academically, especially considering that graduate students can't live on campus like undergrads. So the next social determinant of health is socioeconomic status. The second social determinant of health is socioeconomic status. This includes employment or income, food insecurity, housing instability, and things like poverty and debt, which you must understand that these also have a huge role in students' ability to take or retake classes or entrance exams, especially when it's looking at the person's income or their debt. The third social determinant of health is health and healthcare. This includes access to healthcare and primary care, availability of healthcare, health literacy, and access to mental health services. So if students are having health issues or problems accessing a provider, it can affect the student's ability to spend additional time on schoolwork or courses or resume or CV building opportunities, which can all lead to poor academic and professional performance. So just something to keep in mind, if you notice a student who is having issues related to health or healthcare access, it may be beneficial to mention to them the on-campus clinic or the counseling services offered through CUSOM. The next social determinant of health is the social environment, such as community engagement, discrimination, social integration, and support system. A lack of support systems and social integration, along with discrimination and little to no community or organization involvement, can cause a student to feel extremely isolated, and that may be reflected onto their academic performance. If you notice a student who is experiencing these issues in their social environment, it may be beneficial to remind them of the many different organizations and communities that CPHS offers to all their students in all programs. The last social determinant of health is educational attainment, and this includes things like early childhood education and development and language or literacy. So these have an effect on how they perform in their higher level education, like the graduate level courses they are taking at CPHS. And the language and literacy can be an extremely large barrier to academic success and comprehension, leading to a larger effect on their professional lives later on. So if a student is having issues comprehending course material due to language or literacy barriers, or because of their previous education, just remind them of the tutoring center that is at CPHS. And just another reflection question to think about on your own time. Just think of some examples of determinants that you have seen in previous advisees throughout your years at CPHS.
So just to kind of close out the presentation as we think about the advisees and HPREP participants that you are going to be working with throughout the week, when we think of this idea of one person in all of these 5 social determinants of health, we can think of different examples of each of them, so we can see the bubbles that are branching off as examples. But these are not independent of one another. They actually can connect with one another. Friendly reminder as we get ready to go into HPREP, all of these wonderful professions, they all play a role in helping with these social determinants of health, just as how you are playing a role in advising and helping these students become the best applicant they can be, to be the most competitive for whatever program they decide to go for, and then ultimately to be a competitive and successful student wherever they decide to go. So we thank you for the time that you are taking to be an advisor during HPREP, and we thank you for taking the time just to listen to this quick training about to be an HPREP advisor and the impact that you are going to have on these participants' lives during the week of HPREP. So thank you and have a great night.